We're hosting a community garage sale today, my daughter-in-law chirped as she flung open the front door at 7 sharp. It's time to declutter the stale, lingering energy from the past. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. On the front lawn, our lawn, the one my late husband and I had planted sod on 37 years ago, sat a dozen folding tables, and on them my life. My wedding photo with James, he in his navy dress uniform. Me in my grandmother's hand-beaded gown lay curled at the corners, priced at $2. My mother's teacup collection, delicate porcelain roses, hand-painted during wartime rationing, was being handled by a teenager chewing gum. A woman in yoga pants held up a silver box. How much for the old letters, she asked. Those weren't just old letters. They were love letters. From my husband. When he was deployed in '74. But before I could answer, my daughter-in-law Tina answered for me. Take the whole box for $5. It's all just dusty sentiment. And she laughed. I had heard the word declutter before, but I had never known it could mean erasing someone's entire identity. I stood there, still wearing the silk robe my husband gifted me for our 40th anniversary, watching as strangers rummaged through what used to be sacred. No one even looked at me, not even my son. Ben was by the driveway, sipping cold brew out of a mason jar, nodding along to Tina's orders like some intern on his first day. I whispered, Ben, these are my things. He gave me a polite but distant smile, like I was a client, not his mother. Now that Dad's gone, Tina said loudly, facing the crowd, we're all about fresh beginnings. Let's free this house from stuck memories, and people clapped. They clapped, like it was some spiritual ceremony, like they were releasing trapped ghosts instead of selling off what remained of my history. If you've ever watched a woman get erased from her own home in front of her son, her neighbors, and smiling strangers, stay until the end, and leave a comment with the name of your city if you've ever seen this happen near you. Hit subscribe if you believe people deserve to age with dignity and not be decluttered. I couldn't speak. But inside my chest, something cracked. Because this wasn't just a garage sale. It was a public execution. I watched as a college girl loaded my late husband's typewriter, his old Remington he used to write sermons, into her Prius. Someone else pulled out a photo album of our family trip to Crater Lake. I hadn't even known Tina had taken it from my room. They opened it, chuckled, and said, "Who are these people?" I wanted to scream. They're mine. They're me. That's my life you're thumbing through. But I just stood there, invisible. I counted over 30 people in our front yard, and not one of them noticed I was crying. Inside, in the kitchen, I found the china cabinet wide open, empty. The corner of a post-it note stuck to one shelf, $15 for full set. Sold. This was the china I had brought in my carry-on from my grandmother's estate in Vermont. I opened the drawer where we kept holiday linens gone, the cedar chest in the hallway missing, even my recipe box, the one with cards so stained in butter and time they practically told our family's history, vanished. In the living room, I saw one of the neighborhood ladies holding up my wedding veil. It fluttered like a flag. Vintage bridal pieces are so in right now, she said to her friend. My hands shook. I turned to my son. Ben, please, just let me take my things and go. He frowned, awkward. Mom, Tina and I talked about this. You said you were going to move into the in-law suite eventually anyway. Right. No, I said. I never said that. He looked past me. We're just trying to make space for the baby. Then say that. I whispered. But don't erase me. Tina walked in, holding a clipboard. We've made over 480 already, and it's not even 10 a... Mm? She leaned closer, her voice suddenly soft, but not kind. You can keep the church brochures and maybe that porcelain angel thing. We're being generous. I stared at her. This woman who once called me Mom when I helped her through her first miscarriage. This woman I cooked for, cleaned for, watched call the midwife with when she was pregnant with her firstborn. Now she was deciding what pieces of me were allowed to remain. This wasn't minimalism. This was erasure. By noon. Almost everything I had touched in the last 40 years had a sticker slapped on it. $1, $3, $10. I saw a man walk away with the quilt my mother sewed by hand during her cancer treatments. Tina stopped me as I moved toward him. Let it go. Lorraine, she said. We're making space for the future. I whispered. What about your past? What about mine? And she said, without blinking, the past doesn't match our aesthetic. The past doesn't match our aesthetic. I went upstairs. My room, my sanctuary was rearranged. The old wooden dresser James built was gone. In its place, a sleek, white IKEA piece. My bookshelf replaced by floating shelves holding Tina's spiritual decor, white candles. Himalayan salt lamp, a resin sculpture of a faceless woman in meditation. My rocking chair replaced by a yoga mat and diffuser. A hand-lettered print read, New energy only. There was only one thing left untouched. A music box. It sat on the edge of the window. James gave it to me on our first Valentine's Day. I opened it. It didn't play. But inside, folded neatly, was the letter he wrote me from the Philippines. The one that made me believe in forever. I slipped it into my robe pocket. The only thing they hadn't sold. Yet. And then, from the hallway, I heard Tina's voice. Let's check the attic next. I bet it's full of stuff we can repurpose. I froze. The attic held the memory boxes, my daughter's old paintings, my father's military pins, James's journals, my first son's ultrasound photo. They were heading there next. At that moment, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't just about space. This wasn't even about control. It was about elimination. And no one was going to stop her. Not Ben, not the neighbors, not the church friends who waved from the sidewalk. Only me. Have you ever seen someone be erased in plain sight while others clapped and called it healing? Do you think we should protect memory even if it's messy, outdated, or unfashionable? Leave a comment. Tell us what you think. Your story might help someone else feel less invisible. But what I didn't know was that Tina wasn't just selling my past. She was preparing to rewrite it. It began the morning after the garage sale. I woke up in a house I no longer recognized. Not just the furniture, Tina had already done her makeover sweep, replacing the soul of the home with her minimalist pieces. But it was something else. A shift. A quiet rearrangement of power. I reached for my bedroom door and found it didn't open all the way. A small wedge had been placed at the base. When I went downstairs, the kitchen smelled of cinnamon and bleach. Tina stood at the counter, pouring oat milk into a new ceramic carafe. She didn't turn around. She said, as if it were just an offhand remark, "We've switched the locks." Ben and I felt it was time to rekey for safety. I blinked. Without telling me. Oh. It was in the group chat. There was no group chat. She turned to me finally, smiling, but it didn't reach her eyes. Anyway, you won't need keys anymore. You're not running errands these days. Right. That was the first moment I realized what was happening. wasn't random. It was designed. By noon that day, I noticed my mail no longer arrived in my name. Envelopes addressed to the Nguyen household, not Lorraine Harper. Even my social security check was rerouted electronically to Ben's joint account. Tina had suggested consolidating finances for clarity the month before. I hadn't realized it meant disappearing from my own banking app. I went to use the guest bathroom, my favorite one, the one with the deep lavender tiles James had installed himself, and the doorknob was gone. Yes, gone. Just a circular metal hole where it had once been. At dinner, Tina brought out grain bowls and didn't place a fork for me. I said nothing. Ben noticed. "Isn't Mom eating?" Tina smiled. "She already ate earlier." "Right. Lorraine." It wasn't a question. It was a test. I nodded. Because I didn't want to have that conversation in front of the kids. Because I still hoped this was just a phase, that I'd wake up tomorrow and the doorknobs, the fork, the keys would be back. But it wasn't a phase. It was a system. My granddaughter Chloe came to me one morning with a drawing. It was a picture of the house. Stick figures for Mommy, Daddy, Chloe, and baby Leo. I asked, "And where's Grandma?" She looked confused. She pointed to a small dot in the corner. "That's your room. Mommy says you're resting now." The next week, I walked into the living room and saw a young woman sorting through papers on the coffee table. Tina introduced her as Maya, our new energy consultant. An energy consultant, Maya wore gauzy clothing and hummed as she waved a bundle of sage through the air. She told me I had a dense field of unresolved nostalgia around me. Tina nodded solemnly. "That's why we're centering the home around lighter vibrations. No more ancestral anchors." I wanted to laugh or scream. Instead, I asked where my rocking chair was. Tina replied, "We put it in the garage for donation. You don't need old things to feel grounded. Lorraine, you just need presence." But presence was exactly what they were taking from me, bit by bit. The photos on the stairwell disappeared. The family portrait from James's retirement party was replaced with a canvas print that read, "Be here now." The bookshelf in the hallway was emptied and turned into a plant stand. When I went to the pantry to get my Earl Grey tin, I found it replaced by tins labeled Focus Blend and Gut Reset. One night, I tried to take a shower at my usual time. The water heater didn't work. Ben explained over breakfast. "We installed a timer. It shuts off between 9 p.m. and 6 a.m. to conserve energy." Tina's idea. When I protested, he added, "You can just shower earlier." "Mom, no big deal." It was always Tina's idea, and Ben always agreed. Even when I found my clothes removed from the dryer, mid-cycle wrinkled, damp, and folded on the table like they were in the way. Even when I discovered my daily pills rearranged in a new box, Tina labeled Supplement Optimization. I asked what she had changed. She said she'd consulted a podcast. What shocked me most wasn't what she did. It was how subtle she made it feel. No screaming, no confrontations, no accusations. Just slow, surgical erasure. One morning, I walked into the kitchen and found the family calendar pinned to the wall. Under Saturday was scribbled, "Declutter guest room closet." That was my room, my closet, my home. Have you ever felt someone rearranged your world piece by piece without ever raising their voice? Do you think emotional control always looks loud and angry, or can it come dressed in politeness and podcasts? Tell us in the comments. Your story matters. Someone else may need to know they're not imagining it. That's Saturday. I came back from my short morning walk and couldn't open my closet. A small sticker had been placed over the door handle in transition. When I peeled it off and opened it, I saw boxes stacked high, labeled not with my name, but with words like donate, spiritual release, and legacy reassignment. Legacy reassignment. I dug through one and found my high school yearbook, my mother's scarf, James's Veteran of the Year plaque, and a note from Tina. If there's anything you feel is essential, please submit a short reflection before Sunday. Submit. A. Reflection. To keep my own belongings, I asked Ben that night, "Do you see what's happening?" He didn't meet my eyes. "She just wants the space to feel calm. Mum, that's all. It's not personal." But it was personal, because I was being slowly eliminated, with lavender diffusers, with pastel labels, with blank stares and well-meaning phrases. I tried to call my old friend Karen. Her number had been blocked from the house phone. I called on my cell, but Karen said, "I thought you moved. Tina told us you were living in Arizona now. With your sister, I don't have a sister." I realized then, it wasn't just physical control. It was narrative control. She was rewriting my story, telling people I had moved, telling Chloe I was resting, telling the neighbors I was downsizing, even telling Ben, little by little, that I was becoming forgetful. And it worked, because I began to doubt myself. 2. I misplaced my phone once Tina handed it to me slowly and said, "It's okay. Happens to women your age. I used the wrong remote," she told Ben in front of me. "See, this is why we need to simplify the environment." She took over my prescriptions, just until we get everything synchronized. This was more than decluttering. It was displacement. I wasn't just losing space. I was losing status, voice, belonging. One night, I found Tina in the living room alone, scrolling through Pinterest. I asked gently, "Where is all this going?" Tina. She didn't answer. Just smiled and said, "You know what they say. Clarity comes when you remove the old energy." And then she added, almost like a whisper, "I just wish you'd stop resisting the natural flow." Natural flow. Was this natural? To disappear from your own life? I sat alone that night, in what used to be my reading chair, now relocated to the garage, and stared at the ceiling. And for the first time in weeks, I asked myself, what happens when they decide I'm no longer needed at all? Not just my things, but me. And what I didn't know then was that I was just one step away from being deleted completely. It started with silence, not the kind that sits comfortably in a house, not the kind filled with the rhythm of routine, the humming of morning coffee, the murmur of lives intertwining. No, this silence was surgical. It carved out space around me until I could feel the absence of sound pressing in on my skin. Chloe used to wake me every morning with a hug. She'd crawl into my lap, her warm curls brushing my chin, and whisper about her dreams, pirate cats, flying bicycles, star-shaped cupcakes. But one morning, she walked right past me. No smile, no eye contact. She went to Tina, who kissed her forehead and handed her a green smoothie. I sat on the edge of the couch, clutching a lukewarm mug of tea no one had brewed for me, and watched as my granddaughter recited a new phrase. "Mommy says we don't interrupt Grandma's thinking time." Thinking time. I didn't remember ever needing to be protected from my own family. Later that day, I went to pick Chloe up from preschool. I'd been doing it every Thursday for 2 years. But when I arrived, the receptionist smiled politely and said, "Oh, Ms. Nguyen already picked her up today. She left a note said she'll handle pickups moving forward. No discussion. No explanation. Just gone. I asked Ben that night. He rubbed the back of his neck and muttered something about streamlining schedules. It's not a big deal. Mum. Tina just thought it'd be easier if she handled it. Less confusion. But the only confusion was mine, because my role, my presence, was being edited out of their lives like typos in a Word document. I tried calling my friend Glenda from church. No answer. Again. No answer. On the third day, I took a walk and stopped by her house. Her husband answered and looked surprised to see me. Didn't you move? Tina said you were spending 6 months in Sedona for holistic treatment. Holistic treatment? I stood there, blinking in the sunlight. No, I said. I live 2 blocks from here. He laughed nervously. Oh, my mistake. Sorry. Lorraine. But it wasn't his mistake. It was Tina's narrative. Again. The next day, I opened the pantry looking for my favorite crackers, the ones James used to dip in apple butter during fall. They were gone. I looked through all the shelves, rows of sprouted grains, chia seeds, powdered kelp, cacao nibs, but not a single thing I recognized. I checked the fridge. No eggs, no cream, no butter. Just mason jars with unlabeled liquids and glass boxes labeled things like rebuild blend, post-ego cleanse, vibration fuel. It wasn't just the food, it was the entire house. The music was no longer jazz. It was ambient chimes and flute meditation. The bookshelves, once filled with novels and family albums, were now sparse arrangements of monochrome books with titles like The Art of Less, Letting Go of Stories, Being Nobody. I wasn't even a body in that house anymore. Ben no longer lingered at breakfast. Chloe no longer asked me to read. Even the dog Ranger no longer followed me. Tina had him trained to stay off the upstairs floor. It was isolation by aesthetics, by lifestyle, by spiritual branding. And it worked, because soon I stopped talking. There was no one to listen. Have you ever felt like you were still living in a house but had already been erased from its story? Not with violence, not with shouting, but with quiet substitution, polite avoidance, carefully curated silence. Share your story in the comments. Maybe your words will help someone else recognize what's happening to them before it's too late. One afternoon, I walked out to get the mail. The mailbox was gone. When I asked, Tina said, "We switched to digital everything. Physical mail is just clutter. But my ARP letters, the church newsletter, we unsubscribed from those. Another day. I went to refill my prescription. The pharmacist looked puzzled. Your plan changed last month. It's now under a managed family account authorized by Benjamin Nguyen." That night, I asked Ben about it. He said, "Tina's just trying to keep track of everything so we don't double order. It's really just streamlining. I had never felt so streamlined in my life. Streamlined right out of relevance." I tried writing a letter to my sister-in-law in Oregon. I placed the envelope on the kitchen counter. The next morning, it was gone. I found it opened in the trash, water spotted from the sink. Tina stood there, holding her green smoothie. We don't need to create worry in the extended family. Lorraine. Energy flows where attention goes. One night, I had a nightmare. James was standing at the edge of a cliff, reaching out for me. I ran toward him, but my feet were stuck in sand. The wind carried his voice away. I woke up sobbing. When I stepped into the hallway, the door to Ben and Tina's room was slightly ajar. I heard her whisper, She's waking up more confused now. We need to start thinking long term. Confused? I was not confused. I was being slowly reframed as confused so that they could make decisions for me. I realized then, it's easy to silence someone if you convince others they're fading. And it's even easier if they begin to doubt it themselves. I sat at the kitchen table one morning and asked Tina, "Did you take my watch, the one James gave me in '82? She didn't look up from her iPad. You already misplaced it. Lorraine. We found it in the laundry last month. No, I said. It was in my drawer. She closed her iPad, smiled gently. Sometimes memory plays tricks. Let's just focus on the present. Okay? That phrase, let's focus on the present, became her shield. She said it when I asked about Chloe's school art show. She said it when I mentioned my anniversary. She said it when I asked why my name wasn't on the electric bill anymore. Ben barely spoke to me now. When he did, it was rushed, patronizing. Mom, don't stress. Tina has it handled. Just enjoy your time. Enjoy what? My thoughts, my thinking time, my walks around the block while they planned dinners, trips, routines without me. Even the church stopped calling. When I finally asked Pastor Linda why, she hesitated. Tina told us you were focusing on internal healing and didn't want contact for a while. I hadn't said that. I hadn't said anything at all. That night, I opened a blank notebook and tried to write everything down: dates, names, events, losses. But as I scribbled, my hand shook, not from illness, but from the terrifying thought, what if they're right? What if I am disappearing? And then it happened, the ultimate shift. I came home from a walk and found my room gone, literally. The wall had been closed off with a folding screen. In its place was a yoga corner, essential oils, folded towels, a Bluetooth speaker playing rainforest sounds. When I asked where my bed was, Tina said, "You've been moved to the meditation room upstairs. It's quieter there, more supportive for your nervous system." I walked up. It was a windowless spare room with a twin mattress on the floor, one thin blanket, and a small laminated sign. Silence is medicine. I thought I was being erased slowly, but now I knew they were almost done. It happened on a Tuesday. I was carrying a basket of folded towels to the upstairs meditation room Tina had reassigned to me. My knees were stiff from sleeping on the thin mattress, and the house was quiet, too quiet. As I climbed the stairs, my foot caught on the corner of a yoga bolster Tina had left half pushed into the hall. I lost my balance. Everything went white. When I opened my eyes, I was on the floor. The basket had tumbled, the towels scattered like fallen petals. But I couldn't move. The pain in my hip shot through me like a blade, and I screamed. No one came. Minutes passed, maybe more. Eventually, I heard footsteps, Tina's voice, brisk and annoyed. "What were you doing up here?" Ben followed, concerned but distracted. They lifted me awkwardly and helped me to the car. I remember the drive in silence. Ben tapping the steering wheel. Tina scrolling on her phone. We arrived at the urgent care centre. They wheeled me in. No X-ray, no real exam. Just a quiet nurse, a brief glance, a prescription for pain management, and a pamphlet slipped into Ben's hands. Cognitive Health and Safe Living Environments for Aging Parents. I saw the title from the corner of my eye. Back at home. They placed me in a chair in the sunroom and gave me a lavender-scented eye mask. "Just rest," Tina said, closing the door gently and locking it. That night, Ben brought me dinner: quinoa, steamed kale, and a spoon of miso paste. No salt, no warmth, just fuel. I asked him plainly. Do you think I'm losing it? He paused. His eyes darted toward the hallway. Tina's just worried. That fall scared us. Mom? I nodded slowly. I didn't fall because I'm confused. I said, I fell because of her yoga mat. He gave me a sad smile. Let's not make this about blame. The next day, something changed. I noticed a thin white folder on the kitchen counter while Tina was tending to her houseplants. It read, Preliminary Assessment, Cognitive Decline, Non-Adjudicated. It was open. I saw checkboxes, descriptions, forgets recent conversations, demonstrates paranoia or repetitive questioning, displays emotional volatility in new environments. None of it was true. And next to each A signature, Tina's. I heard footsteps. I quickly shut the folder and stepped away. My hands shook, but inside me, something new stirred. It wasn't fear anymore. It was fire. Later that week, Tina scheduled a wellness home visit while Ben was at work. A young woman named Janice arrived with a clipboard and soft sneakers. She introduced herself as a home care consultant, evaluating environmental risk for fall-prone seniors. I smiled politely, asked questions. As Tina led her into the kitchen, I whispered, Can I ask you something? She looked startled, but nodded. I told her what had been happening. The erased mail, the moved prescriptions, the constant narrative of confusion. Janice frowned. Have they taken you to your primary physician? No. Have you had any legal notice served power of attorney changes? Not that I know of. She grew quiet. Then she said something I'll never forget. They're building a case without you even realizing you're in one. What would you do if someone quietly started redefining your identity without asking you, without confronting you, but just collecting paperwork behind your back? Would you stay quiet or speak up before it's too late? Leave your thoughts in the comments. This kind of control doesn't always look like a fight. Sometimes it looks like concern. After Janice left, I waited until Tina took her midday Zoom meditation call. I crept into the hallway, opened the junk drawer, and there it was, my phone. She had taken it days ago, saying digital detox is good for cognitive health. I turned it on. Dead. I charged it in the bathroom, behind a stack of towels, and when it lit up, dozens of missed calls. From Glenda, from my cousin Margot, from the church, even Chloe's school. I called Margot first. She cried when she heard my voice. We thought you were moved to a care home. Tina told us you'd signed yourself in for evaluation. I didn't, I said, quietly. She went silent. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the sunroom, pretending to nap while the lavender diffuser puffed beside me. I was planning. I wasn't leaving. Not yet. 2 days later, while Tina was out doing community energy work and Ben was at the office, I walked to the corner pharmacy. I asked the tech about my medications. She pulled up the profile. Oh, she said. Looks like all your medications are being routed through an online caregiver platform. Under a shared care authorization? I blinked. Authorized by who? She tilted the screen gently. Tina Nguyen. I asked for a printout. She hesitated. I said I would file a formal request if needed. She printed it. I folded it into the waistband of my leggings and walked home slowly. That night, I found the old wooden box in the attic. It still had James's journal, some old photographs, and our marriage certificate. Tina hadn't made it up here yet. In the corner of the attic was a box labeled "To be evaluated for emotional hazard." Inside, my college diploma, James's funeral program, a letter from Ben when he was 8 that said, "You're my hero, Mommy." I took the letter, the diploma, the journal, and I hid them. Not because I was running, but because I was preparing. The next day, someone knocked on the door. Tina answered. It was the neighbor Eleanor, the one with the red geraniums on her porch. She leaned in and said, "Sorry to interrupt. I think Lorraine dropped this last week." Tina tried to take the envelope, but Eleanor held it out of reach. "Actually, I think I'd better hand it to her directly." I stepped forward. Tina's face hardened, but she didn't object. I took the envelope and thanked Eleanor. Inside, a copy of a flyer Tina had posted on a private neighborhood board seeking resources for elderly cognitive transitioning. Home is no longer safe. Looking into private evaluations. Prefer gradual transition with minimal stress. She had already started looking into homes. Behind my back. Without my consent. That night. I wrote everything down in James's journal. Every lie. Every change. Every locked door. I folded the pages and placed them inside a manila envelope labeled, "If anything happens to me." I hid it in the pantry behind the spice rack. She never cooked. I wasn't afraid anymore, because now I knew they had a plan. But so did I. From that moment on, I wasn't just surviving. I was collecting evidence. I began waking up at 4 a.m., not because I couldn't sleep, though I couldn't, but because I knew Tina never stirred before 6:15. Those 2 hours became my sanctuary. Each morning, I moved like a ghost through the house, checking drawers, scanning desktops, opening apps on the shared family tablet before Tina logged in. It was in those silent hours that I started discovering the truth. Not guesses, not intuition, evidence. The first discovery was a voice memo. I was going through the shared iPad, which Tina often used for yoga videos and energy intention journaling. I found a folder labeled Guided Affirmations. Inside were dozens of audio files, but one was labeled simply April 6th, lawyer call. My finger hovered. Then I tapped. Tina's voice crackled through the speaker, cheerful, deliberate. So, hypothetically, if my mother-in-law's cognitive health were deteriorating, she hasn't been officially diagnosed, but we have observed confusion and resistance to basic routines. Could that qualify under California's Advanced Directive eligibility for partial delegation of decision-making authority? Silence. Then the lawyer replied, "That depends. You'd need corroboration, at least some documentation from a primary care physician or behavioral specialist." Tina, again. "Well, we're working on that. We've created a paper trail, daily journaling, calendar events." She missed Chloe's recital and asked me the same question twice in one day last week. A pause. Then she chuckled. "It's all small stuff, but if you stack enough crumbs." The audio ended. I stared at the screen. I knew then she hadn't just imagined my decline. She was constructing it. The second discovery came in the form of a manila folder in the linen closet, wedged between pillowcases and sheets. It wasn't even hidden well. Inside photocopies of my driver's license, birth certificate, and several utility bills. Tina had added sticky notes on each. One read, "Outdated. Consider POA override. Another review beneficiary info. Ben default." There was a third sticky note next to my Medicare statement. "Do not mention in front of Lorraine. Will cause emotional agitation." Emotional agitation, all I'd done was ask why the electric bill was no longer in my name. That afternoon, I visited the garage while Tina was on a walk with the kids. Behind the storage shelf was an old lockbox James had used for tax paperwork. Inside, I found something I had forgotten existed: a cassette tape recorder. James had used it years ago to record Sunday sermons for our church's tape ministry. The recorder still worked, and I still had blank tapes. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I placed the recorder inside a woven basket on the hallway table and hit record. At 11:42 p.m., I captured this Tina's voice. "I just think we're almost there. Once the new doctor signs off, we can present everything in one go. I'm not trying to push her into anything, just create an environment where she doesn't have to decide." Ben's voice: "Are you sure this is legal, Tina? It's ethical caregiving." That's what the consultant said. She's resisting transition, and we're helping her move with less resistance. That was the night I stopped doubting myself. If you had proof, clear, undeniable evidence that someone close to you was slowly erasing your rights under the guise of care, would you confront them directly, or would you wait, collect more, until the moment was right to strike? Drop your strategy in the comments. I want to know, what would you do if you were me? In the following days, I began building my own counter case. I logged every interaction, every moment of silence, every appointment Tina cancelled for my well-being. I made copies of medical notices, insurance mailers, bank statements. I opened a new Gmail account at the public library in my maiden name and emailed everything to myself. Then came the breakthrough. I went into the crawl space beneath the stairs. No one had touched it in years. That's where I found the fireproof envelope James and I had made after his first stroke scare. Inside were 3 things: our will, naming me sole executor of his estate; the deed to the house signed by both of us; a letter James had written, never opened, addressed to Ben's son. If there ever comes a time when your mother's voice seems small in this family, I want you to remember something. She built the walls around you, sometimes literally, when we couldn't afford contractors. She is not a guest. She is not a burden. She is the backbone. Treat her as such." I cried, not because I felt vindicated, but because I had forgotten that someone once had seen me fully. That same week, a young mail carrier named Matteo knocked on the door. He handed Tina a stack of mail and turned to go, but saw me behind her. The next day, when Tina wasn't home, he knocked again, quietly. He handed me a small envelope, inside a copy of a letter Tina had tried to reroute to the post office manager. It read, "Please redirect all mail for Lorraine Harper to our household address and hold any senior targeted materials for shredding. She is not in cognitive condition to manage her own documents and has requested full paperless redirection through the family." There was no signature from me. Matteo whispered, "I thought you should know." I nodded, stunned. And he added, "My grandmother went through something like this. She never spoke up until it was too late." That night, I moved the recorder to the kitchen pantry. I captured Tina on a phone call again, this time with what sounded like a placement specialist. We'd prefer a facility that uses holistic language, nothing clinical. She responds better to that. We're hoping to make the transition by fall. Fall. It was July. They were planning to ship me out in less than 2 months, but they weren't counting on me collecting evidence. They weren't counting on me waking up early, staying silent, documenting, observing, learning. They underestimated the very thing they accused me of losing: memory. But what I didn't expect was how fast she'd move when she realized I was watching her too. I wasn't always like this. When I was 7, My mother dropped me off at a co-op daycare and didn't come back for 4 days. I remember the woman in the floral blouse telling me, "Your mommy needs rest. She's processing." She meant my mother was high again. I learned early silence has a smell. It smells like peanut butter crackers and fluorescent lights. I also learned that no one would ever save me unless I took charge first. I met Ben in a sustainability workshop in Portland. He was clean, warm, good. He listened. And his family, picture perfect. His dad shook my hand like I mattered. His mum sent me a scarf for my first birthday in the family wrapped in tissue paper, tied with a handwritten tag to my daughter, with care. That made me cry in the bathroom, harder than I'd ever cried. Because she didn't mean it? Not really. Lorraine was polite, but she was always watching. She'd correct me when I stirred the sauce too fast. She refolded the towels after I stacked them. She said things like, "That's just how we do it in this house," with a smile that stung. She didn't yell. That would have been easier. She controlled the narrative by gently erasing mine. When I miscarried our first baby, she brought me soup and told me, "These things happen for a reason." I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I just swallowed the grief, like always. After James died, something changed in Ben. He became slower, quieter. He called his mum more, spent hours in the garage sorting through Dad's stuff. Lorraine would walk into our kitchen without knocking. She reorganized our spice rack. She moved Chloe's toys to safer spots. I said nothing. Because I had promised myself I wouldn't be like my mother. Explosive, violent, unstable. But I never promised I wouldn't take back control. Quietly. Decluttering was my therapy. It made sense. If it didn't spark peace, it left. I started with kitchen drawers, then closets, then rooms. Lorraine resisted. Of course she did. She clung to objects like they were organs. Her dead husband's watch, her great-aunt's broken vase, her yellowed cookbooks. I tried to explain. We can't keep the past and raise our children in peace. But she didn't hear me. No one ever hears me. So I stopped talking and started planning. The garage sale was not malicious. It was ceremonial. I was releasing the heaviness in our home, the grief, the guilt, the history. Ben said nothing, because part of him agreed with me. He didn't want to admit it. But I saw it in his eyes when Chloe asked, "Why is Grandma always sad I was making space? For Chloe, for Leo, for Breath." But Lorraine wouldn't move. She stayed, lurking like wallpaper in every corner. She watched us eat, judged how I dressed Chloe, questioned the lavender oil I rubbed on the baby's feet. And when I tried to explain energy clearing, she smiled in that same soft, slicing way. "Tina, dear, maybe some things just aren't for you to decide." There it was again, the gatekeeping of womanhood. So yes, I started a paper trail. I kept a journal. I recorded missed appointments and odd questions she asked twice. Not because I wanted her gone, because I wanted us free. Do you think past trauma justifies quiet control? Is protecting your peace ever enough reason to erase someone else's place? Comment below. I want to know where you draw the line because I never learned where it was. The call to the lawyer wasn't easy, but it made me feel powerful. Finally, I was the one writing the story, not reacting, not being rewritten. I made spreadsheets, color-coded, risks, triggers, key behaviors. Ben still thought it was about simplifying. He never understood it was survival. When Lorraine fell, I didn't push her. I wouldn't do that. But when it happened, something inside me whispered, this is the moment. We started transitioning things slowly. Doctor appointments, meal schedules, mail, voice access to the bank. She was slipping anyway, wasn't she? Then Janice came, the energy consultant. She wasn't licensed, but she knew language. She called Lorraine's resistance energetic trauma loops. That made sense to me. I wrote it down, quoted it in my file. It looked good. But something shifted last week. Lorraine began waking up earlier. She asked specific questions about medications, about the thermostat, about the mailbox. She stared longer. She held her tea like it was evidence. And yesterday, I caught her watching me from the stairwell. She's on to me. This morning, I found the cassette tape recorder in the pantry. She didn't even hide it well. It was recording. She knows. So now, I have to move faster. I've already drafted the new doctor's statement. I'll schedule her senior sensory retreat tour this week. I've already spoken with an administrator. If she resists, I'll document it. If she cries, I'll call it emotional dysregulation. If she threatens to call her lawyer, well, I've already rewritten the family phone plan. I have access to everything now. This is what she wanted. Isn't it? Structure, stability, safety, and I will give it to her. Even if I have to erase her to do it. I just hope she doesn't act before I finish sealing the door shut. It was supposed to be a short walk. The kind I take when I need to remember I still have a body, still have agency. 10 minutes around the block. No more. No less. But that morning, I walked an extra turn past the park, past the elementary school, and finally around to the community bulletin board outside the library. That's where I saw her, Nancy. She was pinning up a flyer for her piano lessons. Nancy used to clean our house every other Wednesday, years ago. She left when her arthritis got worse. But we had always been on warm terms. She used to call me Miss Lorraine and hum Ella Fitzgerald while dusting the dining room. She looked up, startled, then smiled wide. Miss Lorraine. I thought you moved. There it was again. That lie. That Tina-crafted myth that I was already gone. I smiled gently. No, I'm still here, but not many people come by these days. Nancy paused, looked down, then said quietly, I didn't want to say anything, but something's been bothering me. I tilted my head. She lowered her voice. About 2 months ago, Tina texted me out of the blue. She said she found one of my old invoices in a box and wanted to confirm a few cleaning dates, said it was for a household timeline. She pulled out her phone, scrolled, then handed it to me. There it was. A text from Tina. Hey Nancy, can you confirm you were still cleaning on and off during Jan-March 2023? Specifically days when Lorraine didn't recognize you. We're working on some elder care documentation. It's all confidential, just need memory gaps logged. Thanks, Nancy. Looked at me, eyes wide. Miss Lorraine, I never once saw you confused. You always made me lemon tea. You remembered my granddaughter's name. You corrected me when I put your record player dust cover on backwards. I felt my knees wobble. Not from weakness, from rage. We sat at a shaded bench. Nancy handed me her phone and let me email the text thread to myself. She also sent me a voice note Tina had left her. Hi. Nancy, just circling back. It would help so much if you could mention that Lorraine occasionally confused you with someone else. Maybe thought you were the neighbor. It's not a lie she's been under stress. We just need consistency for the assessment team. Nancy had never played it for anyone. She told me she deleted it once, then recovered it from backup. She hadn't known what to do. Now she did. She looked me straight in the eye. They're trying to remove you, aren't they? I nodded. She reached into her purse and pulled out something I never expected to see. A blank memory evaluation form from a local eldercare consultant. Tina sent this to me too, asked me to fill it out as a previous service provider. I kept it. Something felt wrong. Wrong. It was criminal. I returned home with a copy of the form, the forwarded voice note, and screenshots of the texts. I didn't put them in James's journal this time. I put them in a USB drive. Have you ever learned the truth, not from the people you trusted, but from someone completely unexpected? Do you believe the real truth often comes from outside the family, from a witness with nothing to gain? Share your story in the comments. The third person might just be the hero in someone else's survival. The next morning, I printed every document I had. I walked to the law office down the street, a small family practice where James once handled our living will. The receptionist remembered me. I asked for a lawyer who handled elder rights and estate protection. She scheduled me for a private meeting the next afternoon. I spent that night combing through every drawer Tina hadn't locked. And that's when I found it, a binder inside the kid's toy chest, under a stack of board games. It had been mislabeled preschool portfolio. Inside a full dossier Tina had compiled titled Transition Plan Lorraine Harper, age 73. It was color-coded. Section 1, Cognitive Risk Timeline. Section 2, Household Safety Concerns. Section 3, Communication Barriers. Section 4, Narrative Friction Incidents. Narrative friction. There were actual bullet points, repeatedly questioned utility bill status, increased anxiety. Incorrectly recalled son's job title, potential memory slippage. Became fixated on decorative objects removed during cleansing phase. I closed the binder. Slowly. Then I took pictures of every single page. The next day, I met with the lawyer. Her name was Allison. She was young but sharp-eyed. I handed her the flash drive and the printouts. She read in silence for nearly 20 minutes. Then she looked at me and said, "Do you want to stop this quietly? Or do you want to reverse everything legally and permanently?" I said nothing for a long time. Then I whispered, "I want my house back." She nodded. "We'll file an emergency cease and desist on any guardianship attempts. You're not adjudicated as impaired. You haven't signed over power of attorney. And your cognitive baseline is clean. I'll also recommend a forensic review of any redirected mail and financial access." She smiled. "You're not confused. Lorraine, you're strategic." That night, I returned home. Tina was lighting incense. Ben was reading something on his iPad. I didn't say a word. But I noticed Tina glance at me with a flicker of something new. It wasn't pity. It was caution. She knew. Somehow. She knew. Maybe Nancy had told someone. Maybe she sensed it in my stillness. Maybe she saw the slight curve of satisfaction in my lips. Whatever it was, she knew I wasn't scared anymore. And that terrified her. I wasn't alone anymore. Now it was my turn. Ben thought it was his idea. The family healing brunch. A gathering, he said, to reset the energy after what he called a tense few weeks. Tina agreed, too eagerly. I smiled, because this time I was going to be ready. They set the table on the back patio. Organic fruit, flaxseed muffins, a crystal bowl of beet hummus. Tina wore linen. Chloe wore white. Leo cooed in a sun hat. I wore James's navy cardigan and the gold pin from our 30th anniversary. Not for nostalgia, but for spine. Nancy arrived first. Then Matteo, the mailman with his mother, who also happened to be a retired notary public. Then Pastor Linda. Then Glenda from church. Then Margot from out of town. Each had a reason to be there. None of them were random. Tina's smile wavered by the fourth guest. "Wow," she said, glancing at Ben. "I didn't realize we were hosting an extended circle." Ben nodded. "It's good for Mom to feel surrounded." Tina didn't speak, but I saw her fingers tighten around the tongs. I waited until the muffins were half eaten, until Chloe had wandered inside and Leo had fallen asleep on Tina's shoulder. And then I stood. "Thank you all for coming," I said, steady. Pastor Linda raised her glass. I continued. "I was told this brunch was about healing, so I'd like to begin by offering clarity." Tina shifted in her seat. "Clarity," I repeated. "Through truth." I opened my purse, removed the recorder, placed it on the table. Tina's voice crackled. "If my mother-in-law's cognitive health were deteriorating, we've created a paper trail. Just need consistency for the assessment team." Ben looked up sharply. Tina froze. I pressed play again. "Let's just create an environment where she doesn't have to decide." Gasps. A fork clinked. Then I handed Nancy a printed text thread. She read aloud. "Can you say Lorraine didn't recognize you? Even if it's not fully true, it'll help with her transition." Margot stepped forward. "Here's the change of mail authorization Tina tried to submit, with a forged signature." Matteo nodded. "I flagged it at the post office." Tina stood. This is a setup. These are taken out of context." Pastor Linda spoke gently. "But why would you record your mother-in-law behind her back?" Tina stammered. "She's not well. She's paranoid. We were trying to protect her." Ben turned. "From what, her own house? If you were sitting at that table, if you saw the evidence laid out, and the calm unraveling of someone's truth, would you stand with the woman whose voice had been stolen, or with the daughter-in-law who called it healing comment below? Because sometimes the hardest part isn't knowing the truth. It's choosing a side once it's spoken." I opened the last envelope. Inside James's handwritten letter to Ben, I handed it to him. He read it silently, then looked at me with something that hadn't been in his eyes for months. Recognition. He stood. "Mom," he said, "I'm so sorry." Tina reached for him, but he stepped back. "I want to see the lawyer's paperwork. Everything you filed. Everything I signed." Tina's voice cracked. "I did this for all of us," I said softly. "No, you did this to me." She dropped the crystal tongs. They shattered. So did the brunch. Ben cancelled the power of attorney request that afternoon. He called the family lawyer and reversed mail redirection. He froze all joint accounts connected to Tina's eldercare claim. Tina stayed in the guest room that night, alone. The next morning, she was gone. No note. Just a folded yoga mat, a half-burned candle, and a printed quote left on the fridge. "When the past fights too hard to stay, clear it before it rots." But the real shock hadn't come yet. Because in the file Tina tried to delete before she left, I found something even deeper. A scanned amendment to James's will, one I never saw. One that removed my name from co-ownership of the house and replaced it with Tina's, signed 6 months before James died. The signature, a forgery, and the witness, a name that didn't exist. She hadn't just tried to erase me. She had tried to rewrite the entire foundation I stood on. But Tina didn't know. I had one more surprise waiting for her, and this one came with a lawyer's name on it. It was my first time walking into a courtroom since James passed. Except this time, I wasn't sitting in the gallery, holding his coat while he argued a traffic case. This time, I was the one asking for justice. We filed under California Probate Code Section 8250, contesting the forged amendment to James's will. Allison, my attorney, moved swiftly. She filed motions for forgery under California Penal Code 470, financial elder abuse, under California Welfare and Institutions Code, paragraph 2015-610, tort. Breach of fiduciary duty under California Probate Code 850, within a week. A hearing was scheduled. Tina didn't respond to the summons. Ben had to personally deliver it to her at her mother's house. The day of the hearing, I wore my church hat, the one I used to wear on Sundays when people still asked me for advice. Ben stood behind me. Nancy and Mateo sat 2 rows back. Tina walked in late. She wore beige, no makeup, no smile, no crystals. Just a cold expression and a rustling stack of folders that looked thinner than mine. Allison opened with clarity. Your Honor, we're presenting evidence that the decedent's widow, Mrs. Lorraine Harper, was deliberately removed from a forged amendment to the deed of her marital home without her knowledge, consent, or legal validation. She held up the original will, executed in 2003. Then the scanned amendment Tina had submitted 6 months before James's death. The signature digitally manipulated, the notary non-existent. Then Allison dropped the next hammer. We also present recorded audio in which the respondent, Ms. Tina Nguyen, outlines a plan to isolate, discredit, and transition Mrs. Harper under false pretenses. She pressed play. Tina's voice filled the courtroom. We've built the paper trail. All we need is consistency. It doesn't have to be fully true. The room was silent. Even the judge blinked. Then Allison turned to Tina. Do you deny that voice is yours? Tina opened her mouth, then closed it. The judge leaned forward. Ms. Nguyen, are you currently in possession of any property, financial accounts, or legal documents belonging to Mrs. Harper? Tina shifted. My husband and I co-managed. The judge interrupted. That's not what I asked. Tina went quiet. And then the moment came. Allison stepped forward with a single sheet of paper. Your Honor, this is a notarized statement from Nancy Torres, a third-party service provider, who was asked to fabricate elder disorientation claims to justify a guardianship path again, without consent. She paused, then delivered the line. I'll never forget, manipulating someone's legacy under the mask of concern isn't caregiving, it's coercion. Tina's lawyer asked for a recess. The judge denied it, and instead ruled immediately. The forged amendment is void. All rights, ownership, and control revert to Mrs. Harper. He added, this court strongly recommends that any future attempts to assume guardianship without medical basis be subject to investigation under California elder abuse law. I closed my eyes and exhaled. I hadn't realized how long I'd been holding my breath. Was this enough? Was the legal win truly justice? Or just the beginning of something deeper? Do you think Tina got what she deserved? Or should elder abuse carry stricter penalties? Comment below. Because one person's victory in court could open the door for someone else still fighting to be heard. As we walked out of the courtroom, Tina didn't look at me. Ben did. He took my hand in his, the way he used to as a child when we crossed the street. Outside, reporters had already begun to gather. Someone asked, Mrs. Harper. How do you feel? I said. Seen. And I meant it. We spent the next 2 weeks filing official reversals. Ben helped close the shared accounts. The deed was re-recorded in my name. Tina moved out permanently. She took her yoga mat, her Himalayan salt lamps, and her declutter energy plaques. She left the music box James had given me. Because deep down, she knew it wasn't hers. But before I could breathe again, before I could fully believe it was over, Alison called me. She had gone through one last document Tina had submitted months ago to a private bank account. And what she found, a wire transfer, $15,000, paid to a consultant in Oregon, a woman listed as a memory documentation specialist. But the woman never existed. The address was fake, the phone line disconnected. Tina hadn't acted alone, and that meant this wasn't over yet. Justice gave me my house back. Now it was time to take back myself. The first thing I did was repaint the front door. It had always been Burgundy James's choice. I made it royal blue, bold, honest, unmistakable. The next thing I did was bake 4 loaves of orange poppy seed bread, 3 batches of lemon scones, 2 trays of my mother's blueberry crumble, the one Tina once called texturally outdated. I brought them to the church potluck. No explanations, no announcements, just a smile. And when people saw me, they clapped. In the weeks after the hearing, I didn't gloat. I didn't post online. I didn't issue warnings or lectures. I simply reclaimed space. In my house. In my family. In myself. I called the woman who runs the community center and asked if they still needed volunteers for the reading room. She said yes. I arrived the next Monday with a tote bag full of stories and bookmarks that said, "Memory matters. So do you." Ben started coming by more often. At first awkward, then warmer. He brought Chloe and Leo. They sat on the carpet and played with the same wooden toys I'd packed away during Tina's energy purge. We coloured. We made oatmeal cookies. We laughed. No talk of trauma. No talk of courts. Just time. One Sunday afternoon, I hosted a small gathering. 10 women. All over 60. All once caregivers. Some widowed. Some divorced. Some quietly surviving the same kind of erasure I'd endured. We called it the Invisible Rebellion. We met every second Sunday. No sage, no smoothies, just truth. Have you ever seen someone go from overlooked to unforgettable without raising their voice? Have you witnessed someone rise not in revenge, but in quiet power that couldn't be denied? Comment below. Share your story, your strength, or someone who inspired you to fight back with grace. The attic was mine again. I took out James's journals and digitized them, bound them into a small print book for Ben and the kids. Chloe helped me create the cover art, a watercolor of a house with bright blue doors. She titled it, "What Grandma Remembered." Even the garden changed. Tina had pulled out the roses, said they were too labor-intensive. I replanted them, and this time added lilies, my daughter's favorite. I placed a bench beside the wild lavender. Every Thursday morning, I sit there with my coffee, and sometimes neighbors pass by and sit with me, not to check on me, not to monitor me, just to talk. About books, about the weather, about what it feels like to be seen again. Tina never came back. Not physically. But once, I received a small padded envelope, no return address, inside my music box, the one from James, and a note. "I thought this might belong to you after all, T." I didn't cry. I didn't call. I simply wound it up and let it play. Soft, slightly warped, but still singing. Just like me. The house is different now. Not because it's full of things, but because it's full of me again. Not the version Tina tried to erase, not the one Ben forgot how to defend, but the one who chose to survive out loud. I was never a victim. I was a witness. And now I'm the narrator. If this story spoke to you, if you've ever felt invisible, erased, or quietly replaced, know this: you are not alone, and you are not finished. Subscribe to this channel for more stories like this, bold, emotional, and true to the power of memory and justice. Because the next story might just be yours. My daughter-in-law tried to sell my life for $5 a box, but what she didn't know was that I was priceless.